Hello, welcome back to this series where I show you how I'm an awful programmer, just terrible, honestly. I mean, I've got a degree in this shit and I'm horrible, horrendous. Anyway, last video we saw how useless Unity were at handling rotations, and this month it's no different at all. Only it's not rotations, it's joints. Yes, joints. In this one we're going to be trying to make some towable objects. So when you're driving around as Perry, the little robot, the point of the game is you're a robot on a planet, you're driving a robot. So you're a robot, you've got to pull stuff around. But to do that, you need to have some stuff to pull around. So let's make some stuff to pull. Also, if you've clicked this video, you've seen the title, you know what's going on. We'll chat about it at the end, alright? We'll do the video, and then we'll have a little natter at the end, alright? You stay behind after class for me, and we'll have a cup of tea and a biscuit. Or something less British. You know, whatever you want. If you want those weird biscuits with gravy that you have in America, that's up to you. They look weird, though. So first thing we need to do is make a square. Make a square and we stick some hover points on it. So Perry hovers by using hover points. So these are 4 points that are placed under her feet and they shoot a raycast down, and then depending on how far away from the ground they are, you fire an inverse force, so you bounce off the ground. So we just do that for our towable object and then we check that it all works properly, and it doesn't seem to work. Why is that not? Well, you know, it helps if you set force to something other than 0. Okay, then we'll try again. And it's hovering. It's hard to see because it's exactly the same colour as the background, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Apologies, but it's hovering. It's there. Look, you can push it around. It stays stable. That's pretty cool. Nice. That's actually quite fun. Just sort of nudge it around a bit. Why not? Yeah, there's definitely something in this gameplay-wise. We could absolutely just have some things hovering around that you could drive around into. I wonder if I can get on top of it. Not quite. Ooh, no, still not quite. Go on, one more time. We'll have one more go, and then we'll stop fucking about. Right, we need to run up. No. Damn. Oh well. Come on, let me get on top. Let me get on. That sounds weird out of context. I just want to see if Perry can jump on it. Let me hover above it. Let's see if you can. Nearly. Oh no, you stupid thing. So I did this for quite a while. If you couldn't tell, I pushed this thing around for a good while. Tweaked some of the settings so there's less friction, and off it goes, sailing away. Nearly there, and off the edge of the world. Bye. So yes, I bullied this cube for a little while, but enough of that, it needs to be towable. So to do that I made this little trigger collider here, a little circle, a little sphere. Circle's only 2D, I know shapes. Well, that's the saddest brag ever, isn't it? That's like preschool stuff. Anyway, this little sphere, whenever the player gets near it, then we'll say we're near it. This is a good first step. So if ever we are near it, then we want a little button to light up and we want to check that it's recognised that the player is near it. Nice. And then the next step is to add a spring joint. So if we're in the collider, then we press the hitch button and then we attach ourselves to the spring joint. So let's see how that works. Oh, it kind of works. It pulls it a little bit behind, but it sort of works. Oh, and then it does sort of phase into you a bit. It does sort of crash. Yeah, that's not exactly how we wanted it. That's not perfect. Okay, take 2. No, we can do it straight through it, and then the spring's broken. The spring just snapped. That's not. Yeah, that's worse. That's gone backwards. Yeah. Okay, so let's improve the brake force by infinity, and we'll do that with the torque as well, which I think means if it spins. I don't know. Have I not done a good enough job of illustrating that I'm not very clever at this point? And see how we go. Ooh, and it's crashed into us. I'm not connected to it. We've not hitched, just crashed into us. So it's at this point I realised there was a bug with the springs, or maybe not a bug, but an unintended consequence is that the springs have weight, and so when it's not connected to Perry, then the front of the towable will just sag to the floor because of the hovering. Which is a pretty niche issue, but it's one that we definitely want to avoid. So then I got the idea to set the spring to be 0 at runtime in the code, and then whenever we connect to it, we will then set the spring to be whatever length works. And then let's give that a test run. So it's being pulled. It's not quite strong enough. Let's turn that up a little bit. But the spring is connected. It's a bit janky at the moment. It's very jerky. But we have a joint. We have an object that Perry can connect to and pull around. So that should be half of the battle, right? Surely we should be there now. Let's just tweak a few things and make it drive a bit better. Wow, look at that. After messing around with them numbers a little bit, it looks like it's being towed. Although it's still not quite right. So after fooling around with these numbers a little bit, I still wasn't quite happy about how far behind it lagged. But then the nature of the spring joint is that it's springy. It doesn't feel like it's connected. It doesn't feel like it's a tether, you know. So when you're driving around, it does just sort of follow kind of meekly. It doesn't feel like you're pulling it. It feels like it's just sort of lazily bobbing along behind you. So then I thought, well, maybe 2 spring joints is the solution. We have one on each side, and then whenever you pull left or right, the one that's further away will take up the slack, and then it should have more stability, more overall force. That means I did have to copy some of the code over that was, setting the length to be 0 at runtime, and then do that for the other string as well. So we had to set the spring and the damper and the connected body. Which was a bit of a faff, but not too bad. So we've set that up in the player script, and then we'll set it up in the spring script as well, in the towable script. And then after driving around with this one a little bit, again, wasn't feeling quite right. So every time you'd stop, one spring would take up the slack, and it would sort of settle to one side. It would never sit neatly behind Perry, and that kind of irks me a little bit. That's not how I wanted it to work. So then I went back to one joint, just one spring, and kept tweaking the settings, trying to figure out if I could set the anchor points at different places and see if that would help. But ultimately, it just wasn't feeling quite right. But luckily, Unity has more than one kind of joint, so let's try out a different one. So for more minute control, Unity has something called a configurable joint, which basically can be like any of the 3 kind of joints in Unity. The spring joint, and the other ones, but the configurable joint can be anything you want, really. That's why it's called a configurable one. You can set it to react however you want in a variety of different ways, and strengths and forces and angles. And I used this very nice video here from Paradot, I think that's how you pronounce it, or Parado. I don't remember. This video was ages ago. I did this last month. So I followed this through and set mine up in a similar way to these train joints, because I wanted it to feel like you were pulling it along and it was connected very stably. I didn't want it to feel like, I got a piece of elastic and started dragging something around. So I set some limits up, and as you can see, it feels much more chunky, more clunky, but clunky in a good way, sort of, kind of. So when Perry pulls forward or backwards, you can see there's a big jolt of, there's the limit, there's no sort of cushioning in it, which there should be a little bit, but I think this is much closer to what I was hoping for when making a towable object. And then came the challenge of turning left or right. See, it's fine in the first person perspective, but you can see on the left there that the object is just sort of dragged. It feels like it's not being towed. It's more just being swung around, which isn't what we want. So I messed around with some limits a little bit and set some angles and some other variables, basically just saying that when you go left, there's a certain amount of leniency when you turn that way or when you turn the other way, but that results in this sort of weird parallel movement, which doesn't feel very natural at all. It feels very strange and very not physicsy. But then I noticed something called axis and a secondary axis, and so I started fooling around with some of those numbers, and eventually, after changing the axis Y to 1, then you can see when I turn left or right that it feels more natural. It's actually sort of following the angle you're going, like if you had a caravan. Very British this episode. If you had a caravan and you turned left, then the towable would turn left with you after you turn. It wouldn't just immediately snap left or right. So this now feels much more in-world, makes sensible. Pretend that was English. Pretend any of that made any sense whatsoever, please, if you could. That'd be really nice. And then the problem started. So you remember before we had a spring joint where I would manually say this spring should not have a spring until we connect it to it to stop the front from sagging. Well, configurable joints have a lot more things. So there's a lot more springy bits and a lot more things to change. And it's a lot more complicated to change anything because Unity won't let you create a new configurable joint at runtime, which was my first plan. I thought, well, I won't have a joint there. I'll create one when you go up to it, so then there's no problem. And that should be the end of it. But you can't create them. And so what I thought instead was, okay, I'll have to edit them like the spring joint. But the configurable joint doesn't have any parameters that you can edit it like a spring joint because it's all much more locked off. So instead, what I ended up doing was a real fucking headache workaround. But basically, this is how it works. Each towable will have a child item with another configurable joint on it. That one will be set to nothing. Naught, that's the equivalent of off. So it will be completely free, it will have no weight, no spring, no damper, no angle, no nothing. And then the one on the actual item, on the parent item, is set up properly. So then at runtime, I'm going to swap all of those parameters. I'm going to say, right, save the correct settings. Save the settings for off. Then we're going to set the actual joint to off. And then when it becomes connected, we set all of the joints back to on. Which is ridiculous that I have to have two of them just as an example to say, hey, Unity, this is what I want. And do that. I can't just literally go, right, here's the number, I want it to be 0. Is that allowed? Because it's not, because Unity's a fucking nightmare. It's ridiculous. And after all of that, it looks like this. So you can see there was a bit of a jolt when it connected, but that's fine. And there's much more of a damper now when you go forwards or backwards to the limit. But essentially, it is firmly connected and you can pull it around and oh my god, wasn't that a headache. Whew. Yeah, that was a few long nights of googling, that one. Anyway, then I need to make some actual towable items. We don't want to just look at big grey squares all the time, do we? So first off, I wanted to make what I originally was calling the fertilizer, but I now realise it's more of a water bowser, which is not the guy from Mario. It's a big water tank, basically, that tractors can pull around and use water to water crops, or to plug into water sprinklers, or whatever. You don't water sprinklers, that'd be a weird world. But yeah, it's a big water tank, and I'm going to make you pull one around to water the plants that you plant in the game. So, I started with a base, I made it just a bit more of a funky geometric shape, and then I started making the tank. I wanted it to look like it carries a lot of water, and I wanted it to be sort of broken up into segments in some way. I wasn't quite sure yet, but I started out with this sort of nose cone, sort of squash sort of shape, before I realised that look at the robot. Look at Perry. That's what the style we're going for. I can't make a really smooth cylindrical tank. That just doesn't look right. So I scrapped that and I made this new tank instead, which was much more blocky and much more in keeping with the game's aesthetic. I had a little funnel on the back and yeah, coloured it in, brought it into the game. Bish bash bosh, you've got a thing to pull around. But that's just the beginning, because now we need to make more towables. We need to make a satellite, we need to make a big scary MacGuffin, we need to make like an escape pod thingy, and then they all need to light up, and they all need to have animations, and I'm pretty tired. That's a lot. And the thing is, that is a lot of work for just in my spare time. That's the thing. And I love doing it. I do. I love making this game. The problem is that I now don't have much time to make this game. Let me give you an example. This is a clip from the first devlog I made a year and a half ago now. But we also add a bit of talk, because without that, what would happen is Perry would just sort of float forwards and it would just look weird and out of place. And then this is a clip from the one I made last month. And this was actually really easy. Basically just say start a timer, which I bloody love using a timer, because you just say, oh well, get this random value and add time.delta time. Delta time is the time between the last frame and this one, and update is run on every frame. So every frame we say add the amount of time that passed since we last did this. There's quite a difference there in, you know, quality and production and general stuff. And that means that I have less time to actually make the game, which is the complete opposite of the reason that I started making these videos. I started making them to keep myself basically held accountable. I wanted to make firm, steady progress every month, and if I didn't have a video out, then I've not done enough work. That was basically how it went. But it's gone from doing 3 weeks of work and then a week of making a video to maybe a week and a half of work and then live stuff and then making a video. And that's just not enough progress. It's taken so long. So over the last 12 months, I've made a video every single month. And they haven't always been the best or the longest or whatever. But I've done it for a year. I think that proves enough to me, at least, that I'm motivated. I'm working on it. But at this rate, it's never going to get finished. It's just not. Fun fact, the day this video is released is the day that I originally put in for the release date when I made the store page on Steam last year. Now granted, that was before, my computer exploded and I lost all backups of my game and I had to start again, blah 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 blah. But if I want to do that, if I even want to release this game by today next year, then I'm going to have to seriously change something up. And I think what that means is that I'm going to stop making monthly devlogs. I'm still going to make them, just when I've got the time for them. Because right now I just haven't. I haven't got the time for live stuff, as well as this, as well as making the game itself, as well as just existing, right? So I think the plan is I'll do a video when I've got something to show, when I think it can be cool, and when I've got enough time to make a video that I'm proud of. Because the last few, there's some good bits in there, there really are, but I'd rather it be something that I'm very, very proud of, rather than just, I think it was okay. And so that's the plan going forward. So subscribe if you want to stick around for that in 3 months or whenever I next get to make a video, and I'll see you then.